Okay guys, yes, I'm sorry I didn't put a video up last week. I've been a little bit busy getting the training thing together and also doing a little bit of Patreon member exclusive content as well. And this video today is going to be a bit of a spin-off from the last one of those that I did, because we've got this nice Gannic portrait from one of my Patreon members, Steve. And yeah, we're going to make a nice picture, rather like, when this will work, come on, rather like that, yeah? Okay, so we come back to this raw file. We're in the develop module of Lightroom, and this is the raw file straight into Lightroom with Lightroom's crappy background adjustments. And of course, you know, I mean, we look at the image, it's tack sharp. We've got one or two things we need to do in post. We've just got a little bit of feather filament stuck to the side of the beak there. We've got this specular highlight which is blown here, and yet you don't get any reference to that up here in the Lightroom histogram. And to all intents and purposes, we can't see very much detail in this white plumage of the gannet, fundamentally because this has been shot in full bore sunshine, and so it's a very contrasty, very harsh light source, and so yeah, it's making the highlights look a bit hot. Or is it? No, not really. It's Lightroom that's actually at fault here and is making the highlights look hot. So we need to get the highlights under control, and the simplest way to do that is to get rid of all the excessive contrast adjustments. So I'm going to come over here to my process version swap preset, and there we go. And now we can see we've got all this wonderful detail recorded by the sensor on this Canon 1DX Mark II. And the other nice thing is we can, if I reset that, you'll notice inside here the V of the back of the mouth of the Gannet, it's all looking very choked up and black, whereas if we process version swap it, now we can see we can get detail coming out inside this deep shadow area. And I'm just going to put all the exposure back just for a minute, and we can see we've got all sorts of nice sexy looking detail in there. And I'll come back out to fit to screen view, and all I want to do is just tame the highlights down a little bit. Now, you know, I mean, you've got to be careful because you don't want to actually destroy all the harshness of the lighting. This is all about photographing white subjects in harsh light, and it's the same thing will apply no matter what you're photographing, be it a wildlife scene, a model with white clothing and a white hat on, or indeed snow in a landscape. You've just got to get things under control, but not overly so. So we've actually recovered the highlights down to -57 here. I'm actually going to bump that back up a little bit to about -30, and then I'm just going to tug the whites down just a little bit, so we're keeping the majority of this detail, but it's not over the top. I just want to warm things up just a little bit. And the things that I don't like about this image are basically problems that we can address inside of Photoshop a lot easier than address inside of Lightroom. We've got this out of focus flower up here, and that needs to be cloned out, and that's a simple enough operation inside of Photoshop. And we can also see we've got these dark areas in the sea which are, they've got quite a strong green content, And if it was dark at the top of the frame all the way across, I wouldn't be particularly bothered. But we've got this light area and it looks quite bobbly. It looks made up of circular areas, and I just want to get the top of this frame to look less eye-catching, if you like, because if I was going to submit this image for stock, I mean, I can't submit this image because it's not my shot, but if it was my shot, if I was going to submit this for stock, commercial stock, I would submit it uncropped, because then a picture editor could crop it as he wanted. And of course, uncropped, there's a lot of room for text over the top, so you don't really want to crop your images too much for composition when you making images for stock. But of course, if we're going to make a print, we do want to crop the image. So that's by the by, but that's something we can address a lot easier in Lightroom than in Photoshop. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I just want to try and teach you a workflow that uses Lightroom and Photoshop. Let's face it, if you're a member of the Adobe Creative Cloud photography thingamabob, then you have both Lightroom and Photoshop, and really and truly you should be using both programs and using the strengths of one leveraged against the other. And there's global adjustments, which are 90% of the time better done inside of Lightroom, and then there's localized adjustments, which are 100% of the time best done inside of Photoshop. So there you go. Anyway, so from a starting position, I'm quite happy with this image. I might just go and up the vibrance of the image just a little tiny bit, and we'll come into the HSL panel, and I think we'll go to saturation, and we'll just lift the saturation of the oranges and yellows just a bit, just to start to make the blondish orangish markings on the coloration of the back of the head and the nape of the neck on organic, just stand out just that little bit more. So I'm quite happy with that, to go over into Photoshop to address the top of the frame, this area here, and this blown highlight on the end of the beacon, just titivate that up. And then what we'll do is we'll bring the image back into Lightroom. So we're just going to go right click, and we're going to go edit in, and we'll go edit in Photoshop, and we'll just flip over to Photoshop, and here we are. And so what we're ready to do, I don't know why it's opened it twice, so what we're ready to do now is actually go and do the first thing, which is the simplest operation, which is just get rid of this pink bit up here. So we'll go and get the clone stamp tool, and we'll use the right square bracket to lift it up, and we'll make it quite big. We're running at an opacity of 48%. In point of fact, I think we'll turn that up a little bit, and we'll just come and sample from there and just paint that in just like that, and that's it, job done. So what we'll do next is I want to try and get the top of the frame to look a little bit less distracting, and we'll go and get our rectangular marquee tool, and we'll just draw a rectangle to not quite down to the top of the bird's head, and we'll just go Command or Control J depending on whether you're on a Windows or a Mac, and that will actually jump those selected pixels or duplicate them over onto a new layer. And I'm going to go to Filter, and I'm going to go to Blur and Gaussian Blur, and we're just going to drop that in at around about 450, 500 pixels. In this instance 459.1, in other words 460, and we'll click OK. Now if I turn our background layer on, and we turn on and off this Gaussian blurred top of the frame, you can see that it does affect the top of the bird's head. And yeah, you might well see banding in the top of this image. Two reasons for that. Obviously video compression's one, and the other one is the fact that this is a blur, and I'm on a 10-bit colour system here, whereas most people are on an 8-bit colour system. But we can still get banding when we're looking at an image at a small size. If I go and lift it up to 100%, we can't see any banding. However, if I look below the beak, and what I'm going to do is take this up to sort of 200-300%, you can see the general noise that we've got, or the base level noise in the image. And yet if I scroll up to the top here, where I've got this Gaussian blurred layer, you'll notice that there's no noise, and this is how you can very easily see when you get hold of a full resolution image of somebody's whether they've done actually any trickery or not. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to filter, and we're going to go to noise, and we're going to add noise. And in this instance I'm going to use an amount of 0.8% with a Gaussian distribution in monochromatic. And yeah, now you can see there's the level of noise that we're introducing into this layer here, and as we scroll down it's gradually fading out and revealing the base noise of the underlying image. So the noise across the entire field of this image now, including the blurred layer, is pretty much equalized. So that's something you just need to take care of when you're doing any form of Gaussian blur on a coloured layer. You've just got to make sure that you've got your noise levels set right to compensate, and then the adjustment isn't obvious. Right, so we're now going to come back out to a fit to screen view, and of course I can still see that it's affecting the top of the bird's head. So what we're going to do is hold down the Alt key or the Option key, and I'm just going to click the masking icon to add a black mask, and then I'm going to pull up my gradient fill tool, running from white as the foreground colour to black as a background colour. And the awkward area really is the top of the frame, where we've got these 3 or 4 little light areas and this partial dark band across here. And all I'm going to do is put the cursor there, hold down the Shift key, and draw a vertical line to just shy of the top of the bird's head. Ta-da! Rather like that. And so now we've put a graduated mask in there, and if I turn the layer on and off, you can see it's now no longer making any difference to the bird's head. But when I turn it on, yeah, it's clear of the bird's head, but the top of the frame looks a little bit tidier. Now, to keep things nice and simple, I'm very, very happy with that adjustment. So why would I keep it as 2 layers? I'm just going to go layer and flatten image, and then we'll come in and make the final adjustment inside of Photoshop, which is getting rid of this specular highlight on the end of the beak. And you'll notice I am up at 700% magnification. Right, and then we're going to pull up our clone stamp tool, and then we've really got to shrink this baby down. Come on, you can do it, come on, there we go. Probably a little tiny bit bigger than that, that's probably just fine. And what I'm going to do is, you'll notice my brush is oval and it's leaning over on one side. If we go to the actual brush controls, you can see that I've got my size here, which I can vary, and I've got my hardness, and I'm actually going to turn the hardness up on this because I want to clone the noise as well. But you can see we can actually rotate the brush, yeah, and we can make it circular, or we can make it very elliptical. I'm just going to leave it like that, but I'm going to tilt it a little bit more, and quite frequently I'll re-tilt it as I'm working my way around a curved area, so I keep the top of the curve of the brush in sort of in line with the curve of the subject. So there we go. So we'll carry on. I might just make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to sample from here, so that's hold down the Alt or Option key, and we will just come along in here, and this is where it comes in handy to actually have the curvature of the brush pretty much the same as the curvature of the subject, and I will just eat that in there, smooth that out, and yeah, that looks alright. I'm going to come in here and sample with an opacity of about 50%, and we'll just make the brush a little bit smaller, and we'll come in and resample there, and we'll just dot over that specular there, but I'll actually leave a vestige of it. I'm not too partial on this line here. I'm not going to go and be a crackpot and retouch the gannet's beak as if it was a piece of cutlery and remove every blemish from it. Far from it. But I just want to get these specular highlights tidied up, because nothing drags the eye more than a specular highlight. It's horrible. So I'm actually, you see, if I work down here, my brush is a little bit out of kilter with the subject, so we're just going to tilt it a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more like that, and I think that'll just about do. And I'm just going to sample in here, and then just start to paint away. I'll leave that little touch of a specular there, but what I need to do is to come in and address this dirty great big one here, and you just got to make one or two passes over it, rather like that, and so you get the general drift. And just come in there, just tart that up a little bit, and just tart that up a little bit there, and I think that'll just about do. It's just looking a little bit blue there, so just take that away just a smidge like that, and that'll do for demonstration purposes. So we're pretty much ready to rock and roll. So I'm going to go File, and we'll save, because I don't want to do any more localized adjustments to this image. And you know, I mean, some people might say, well, Andy, why don't you lift some of the highlights in this out of focus foreground here? I don't really want to, because the viewer's eye's got to stay on this gannet. It's not going to go anywhere else. So if I brighten any part of this foreground up, all I'm going to do is compete with the gannet, and I don't want to do anything else to the background. I don't want to desaturate it. I don't want to darken it, because that's just going to look crazy. So this image is now saved out. So if we go back to Lightroom, okay, and this is our image, this one here. So we'll just go 5, 6 and P, so we can recognize it. And yeah, I don't think this is looking too bad at all. Let's go into a 100% view, and you can see, look at that, all that lovely detail in there. The beak's looking nice and clean, and the background at the top of the frame isn't anywhere near as distracting as it used to be, and we can see all the plumage in the bird. So fundamentally, I'd say this was done. I might want to just go and pop a little bit of extra saturation inside the bird's, the back of the bird's head and the nape of the neck. So we might just turn up the saturation of the oranges, and we might just turn up the saturation of the yellows. Now you notice it's just added a little bit of extra saturation to the foreground. I don't particularly mind that, not really. The other thing I want to do is to actually get an adjustment brush, and we'll have it zeroed out. There's nothing in it except for a dollop of 40 saturation, and we're going to keep it very, very small. In point of fact, we might go up to a 2:1 view, and I'm just going to, with the auto mask turned on, I'm just going to paint in here, and just hopefully just increase. In point of fact, we'll turn the auto mask off, and we'll just turn up the saturation of the blue in this area around the eye of the bird, and might just add a little bit of clarity. Turn that saturation up. Yeah, I think that looks a-okay, and we'll go ahead and click done on that. We'll come back out to fit to screen view, and as I said, I might just go back into the basics panel. I might just give it a little tiny lift in exposure, 0.2 of a stop, and maybe just add 14 contrast. No, I don't like that. I'm going to put the exposure back where it was. I don't mind having the extra bit of contrast in there, but I might just tweak those highlights down just a little tiny bit. -27's a bit too much. -19 will just about do. And yeah, we're keeping all those highlights in there. We'll come back to a 1:1 view. Thought it was looking a bit grotty there. We might actually come back into the details panel, put about 6 or 7 points of noise reduction in, but this noise is perfectly acceptable in a full resolution stock image, and when we print it, it just won't print anyway. So there we go, and I'm quite happy with that. Quite happy. I'm not going to fiddle around with it more for the purposes of this exercise. Having said that, I'll just go and try something. I'm just going to pick my mouse up instead. We'll go to luminance, and we'll just lift the luminance of orange and the luminance of yellow. That's looking a little bit better. Yeah, that's done what I thought it would do. Just made it pop just that little bit more. We'll go back to the basics panel, and that is it. If I was going to submit that as a stock image, I would title it, caption it, keyword it, and send it off, because you've got to let picture editors crop images as they see fit and as suits their purpose. But now we'll just say we were going to print this or put it on a website or whatever, or we're going to post it to social media. The thing is, I would want to crop it first of all, so we'll pull up our crop dialog box, and I'm just going to crop this. You can see I've got a custom preset here, which is 1:1.468, which is the actual ratio for all A paper. So we would crop it to A size, and there we go. I'll just scoot it down a little bit, and then with the padlock enabled or locked, I'd probably put the eye just below the 1/3 line from the top, scoot him along until the eye's just about in the middle of the crop area, and click done. And then I might just come in and add a little bit of post-crop vignetting, and there we go. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow YouTube subscribers. Thanks very much for subscribing. Yeah, we're getting there slowly. We're nearly up at 1,000 subscribers, and very grateful to you all. I am too. And yeah, so anyway, there we go. Hope you found that useful, guys. Just a quick little tutorial on how to cope with very bright lighting conditions on a very white subject. so you can pull all the detail back. Having said that, you've still got to get your exposure right in the first place. So anyway, as I said, hope you've enjoyed that, guys. Hope you found it useful, and I shall see you very soon. Tooroo.